We are less than 1 week away from NaNoWriMo 2017, so whether you're in or out, today I'm here with you, giving you my best tips for outlining your NaNoWriMo novel. I think you're going to grab some excellent story structure and outlining tips today. So before we get started, let me just quickly introduce myself in case you're new. I'm Yesenia from WriterMom.net. And WriterMom.net is just a place for writers who want to live a healthy, happy, and successful life while building their author businesses without sacrificing everything for that author business, but kind of building a happy life along the way, along with your business. So there you go. So if you're new, hi, I'm glad you're here. Please say hi in the comments. And I am going to go ahead and dive in because I have been recovering from a cold that I've had all week, but I think I'm finally on the mend. But I do know my voice is a little bit weird today, so I'm going to try to keep this, moving along, and hopefully I can deal. So yeah, we are less than 1 week away, and NaNoWriMo always seems to sneak up on me, even though, it's every single November. And I just looked at my calendar this morning thinking, I still have, maybe 7 to 10 days. Nope. I have less than a week now, and NaNoWriMo will be starting on Wednesday, and for some of you, Tuesday night. So I'm super excited for that. I still don't have an outline ready to go. I have lots of thoughts and ideas jumbled around in my head, and some, lots of ideas worked out on paper, but not anything like super concrete to where I'm feeling like, okay, I'm ready. I am definitely not ready, but I am scrambling to become ready and be ready to go because this is like my favorite time of the year. Hey, Thomas. Thomas is one of my friends and my buddies from my accountability and writers group, so it's cool to see him here. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So first I'll start off with 3 of my favorite resources for story structure and outlining. So if you're still kind of new to writing novels and writing stories, these should be really helpful. If you're not new, then maybe you've heard of these before, but they're also worth diving back into and, maybe reading some of your highlights, if you've read them before, and kind of getting a refresh on all of these concepts. So my very first favorite resource that I always seem to go back to is Janice Hardy's blog post called Parts is Parts. So again, it's something that I have saved and I always seem to go back to it, and I'm going to post the link in the comments so you guys can take a look at it. But it's just a very basic breakdown of story structure and like the different parts you need to have in there. And I actually have a Scrivener template that I always open up when I'm starting a new project, and I actually have it saved in that Scrivener template so I can always have it to refer back to as I'm plotting and outlining and writing. And like I said, it just gives a basic outline of story structure and what it means and what each main event needs to have. Like, it doesn't go into like too much crazy detail. It's it's not a book, so I don't have to like go and dig it up in my Kindle or anything. And it just gives such a good overview of like what needs, like the basic story structure that your story should have in order for it to work. Because I had to learn this the hard way when I wrote my first book. I didn't know really anything about story structure. I probably had some like ingrained into me just because of all the books and movies and things that I'd consumed over the years. And so like I probably had some kind of underlying understanding of how story structure works. But in order for you to be like the best storyteller you can be, you really need to have like an active understanding of how story structure works and why it works, and like all the moving parts and how they fit together. Because it's not something that readers think about, but it's something that if it's not there, they're gonna pick up on that, and you're gonna tell from the poor reviews that your book gets. So it's really important, before you start your novel, to at least have some kind of basic underlying story structure for your book so that it works. And you don't want to write 50,000 words throughout November and it's just like, a bunch of stuff that doesn't fit together as a story. It has to work as a story in order for it to work for your readers. And even with like the millions of kinds of stories that we have in the world today with movies and books and TV shows, like they can all come back to the same kind of story structure. And so Janice Hardy's blog post that I just posted in the comments, it goes through the opening scene, the inciting incident, the Act 1 crisis, the Act 2 revelation, the midpoint reversal, the Act 3 disaster, the climax, and the wrap up. And some of those may be familiar to you, but it's good to at least just go back and look at those again. And even if you think you're a pantser and you don't want to outline at all, at least to have like an understanding of how that works in your head, so that in your head as you're writing, you know where to go to next. And that way your story you can make sure that it works. So we're going to come back to some of those points in a little bit, but first I'm going to cover some of the other two favorite resources of mine. Thomas says, Rachel Aaron's book, 2K to 10K is always good too. That is another good resource. It's been a few years since I've read that one though. I need to go back and reread it, but that is another really great resource. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, another really good resource. Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K, not just about how to write really fast, but also has some good outlining tips in there. And then another really good one, these two are ones that I've read more recently, so they were more top of mind for me. One is Take Your Pants Off by Libby Hawker, and it's a very short and quick read, but I kind of had like this giant aha moment when I was reading it, because it was like the first time I really got and understood like character arcs. And that is super important. Like if you're a writer or any kind of storyteller, it's so important that you understand what a character arc is. And I'm going to come back to that. If you're not sure what that is, just hold on a minute, because I'm going to come back to that. But that's a really good resource for mastering and understanding character arc. And then my third resource for outlining and story structure is Nail Your Story by Monica Leonel. And this is definitely more of a really deep dive into story structure and how it works and why it works. And the first time I read this, like I was just honestly so overwhelmed by all the information on it. Like I couldn't even begin to like process all the information. It just went way over my head and I had to like put it aside. But then when I did come back to it, I just had light bulbs going on constantly as I was reading that book, and I like all the examples it gives in it, and like all of these different layers that you can add to your story if you're ready for that kind of thing. Like if this is not your first rodeo, maybe that's a great resource to pick up. But if you're more of a beginner, Take Your Pants Off or Janice Hardy's blog post would be a good start, or 2K to 10K I think would be good for anybody. So yeah, 3 resources there for outlining a story structure. And again, as a writer, I'm always paying attention to like the movies I watch and the TV shows and the books I read. And like you learn so much from that, because you know, reading these books is not enough. You have to like learn to apply it and recognize it and understand it. And watching all of this like story content really helps you like learn story as well. Okay, so now that we have those 3 resources out of the way, I want to basically, story structure is comprised of 2 things, okay? And you'll kind of pick this up from these resources, but I kind of just want to do a quick run through today for you as a, you know, a good refresh or like introduction to these topics. Story structure is comprised of 2 things, okay? And this took me a long time to learn, so it's definitely something that I wish somebody had taught me on, you know, when I was getting started, especially with my first book. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of having fun with it. But my earlier books would have been way better if I had known all of this stuff. Okay, so the number one thing that you need for a good story structure is to have a character arc. So not just the plot arc, there's also a character arc. Okay, this was huge for me, like I said. And basically the character arc, what that means is that the character by the end of the story is going to change in some way due to the plot arc. Due to the plot arc, the character will also change in some way, and in order for them to overcome this external problem or conflict, they have to overcome this internal conflict or problem. And what we call this is the fatal flaw. And I think I first heard that term in the Take Your Pants Off book. And I think Monica Leonel and Nail Your Story also kind of calls it that maybe. But yeah, it's the fatal flaw. It's like this internal thing that's holding them back. Okay? And before the story really starts, just in the beginning, like they're happy as they are. You know, maybe they know it. maybe they know about their fatal flaw or not, but they're happy the way their life is, or maybe, you know, or maybe they're not, but or maybe they don't really realize a fatal flaw, but they have a fatal flaw. This character is not perfect. There's something holding them back, whether they know it now or not. And by the end of the story, they're going to have to overcome it and change in some way in order to also overcome their external problem, you know, whatever is going on in the plot. Okay? And so the very first important thing that you need to know for outlining your story is spend lots of time on your characters and fleshing them out and finding out who they are, making them real, giving them a backstory, you know, finding out what that fatal flaw is, finding about their personality, you know, what are the things that are going on in their lives that are giving them a problem, what internally is giving them a problem, and why. And what I like to do is to find a picture of like some kind of existing character already, usually from like a movie or TV show, and I like to kind of, you know, I don't want to say base my character on them, but kind of like I know they have the same feel or vibe as that character. So I'll give you an example. So like in one of my first books, and I actually have it, let's see here. It's kind of like that one, but that's the old cover, so I won't show it to you because I don't like it as much. But basically that character from one of my first YA romance series, like she's kind of has this good girl vibe going on, and she reminded me a lot of Gabriella from High School Musical. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, that Disney movie, but she has that kind of similar vibe going on, you know, very studious, very good girl, very like nice. So when I'm fleshing out this character, I might put in a picture of her because so it can remind me of that vibe, and it helps me flesh out that character more. And like I said, you're not really copying that character. It's just like I said, they have the same vibe, so they might have some similarities, but you know, it also helps me flesh that person out into their own character and give them their own unique flaws and traits and pasts and all that kind of thing. Okay, and so let me give you an example of a character arc. So again, we're taking it back to the character arc, and you're going to try to figure out what this is as you're outlining your book. And I like to spend some time on this even before, you know, I plot out my book, or even kind of going back and forth between the plot arc and what's going to actually happen in the book and the character arc. Okay, so one of the movies that I like to watch is Safe Haven, and it's actually on Netflix right now. So if you haven't seen Safe Haven, it's based on a Nicholas Sparks book. It's a romance, and this main character, Erin, is running away from her ex-husband. Okay, and this ex-husband, you know, we get just a tiny bit of like her normal life as it is before the story really begins. And, you know, she is dealing with an emotionally and physically abusive husband. And it starts by she's like escaping from him. You know, something happens, something goes down between them. It's not really clear what, but she runs away. She grabs her stuff and she runs away. And it looks like she might have done something, but it looks like self-defense. We're not sure, but she runs away. And she just wants to get away to this new place where no one knows who she is, no one knows about her past, and she just wants like a new start. And she wants to like run away from that and get rid of it forever. And obviously she's not interested in trying out the whole romance thing again because it just kind of blew up in her face one time. Okay, and we kind of sympathize with her because again, like this abusive husband is like not treating her right, and she's obviously very scared. Okay, and so the character arc here is that, you know, her kind of flaw is that she just wants to run away from her past, and she thinks she can do that without facing her past, without confronting the ex-husband, without confronting her past and like everything that she's gone through. Without kind of resolving that first, she just wants to start this new life without anybody ever finding out, and like she just wants to run away from it all. Okay, so that's kind of an example of a fatal flaw or a character arc. You know, by the end, she's gonna have to overcome that in order to get what she wants. So what does she want? She wants that new life, that new start, maybe possibly with a new guy. Obviously it's a romance, so obviously there's going to be a love interest in there, but she can't have any of that until she overcomes this flaw. And the flaw is, you know, confronting her past, facing her past, as scary as it is, even for her life. She's going to have to do it. You know, she can't just run away from it. Okay, so that's the example of the character arc. So that's one piece. The other piece here is the plot arc. So this is like the actual events of the story, the external conflict. Okay, so like I said, it's what actually happens and how it's resolved by the end. And this is like where the Janice Hardy blog article comes in, and like what I refer to for this, it's like the opening scene, the inciting incident, all the revelations and failures that happen along the way before the end, the climax, and then like the final resolution. Okay, but it's all tied back into the character arc, and you'll see how. So like the opening scene, again, you can go to the Janice Hardy blog post and kind of go for a little bit more of a dive into all of this, but I'll just give a very quick overview. The opening scene, it might be very short, or it might be like a chapter. It could be a scene or a chapter, just depending, but it's basically going to show their normal. What is their world like right now? What is their version of normal? Okay, so obviously for this character, her version of normal is like being scared all the time, being scared of her husband, being physically and emotionally abused. Okay, the inciting incident is this new change that's going to come about in her life that's going to throw everything upside down. You cannot go back to before. This thing has just happened, and now like you're going to have to figure something new out. So for her, it's again, you have to watch the movie to kind of like get a better like understanding of how it all works, but it basically just shows Erin, the main character, and the husband getting into this fight. She's basically defending herself, and something happens, and now he's possibly dead on the floor bleeding, and she has to get away. Like, this is her one chance to get away. She thinks she killed him, and maybe he is dead. She doesn't know. She's not going to stick around to find out. There's no going back, because this is obviously like the first time she has stood up to him, and now she's hurt him, and now she has to get away. There's no going back to before, when she was just scared of him, but she wasn't doing anything against him. Now she has to like run away for her life. Okay, so it's like this one thing that has just happened, whether it's usually out of their control, but now their life is different forever. Okay, now the rest of the book is like where the story is them learning how to cope with it. Okay, so that's the inciting incident. Okay, and then along the way there will be lots of revelations and failures as they try to cope with this new change in their life. You know, they're obviously not happy with it, but until they can become happy, so that they can become happy with it, become happy in their lives again, they're gonna have to learn how to overcome it, which again is tied to their fatal flaw. So the character has to believe that they can overcome this flaw. So maybe at first they don't, and something happens, you know, maybe they have a mentor or other characters kind of helping them out along the way, building their confidence. But eventually this character will believe that they can overcome this problem, but they have to fail a few times first before they actually succeed. I mean, and this reminds me a lot of like Chronicles of Narnia or other like fantasy or sci-fi movies where they have like this big villain that they're going against, and the first time they go against them, they think, oh yeah, I got this, like I'm the hero, like they have this plan or something, and then they like the first time they go against them, they utterly fail, like and they go through all these dark moments until they really figure out what they need to do to overcome that villain. And again, it's tied back to what they need to change inside themselves. Okay, and like I said, there will be a dark moment before they finally succeed, and they change, and they win in the end, whatever genre it is. So in romance, you win by, you know, overcoming your fatal flaw, and you get the guy or the girl. And in other genres, like you overcome this villain or whatever it is, or you find the murder suspect or whatever, you catch the, you know, you solve the mystery, whatever it is, depending on your genre. So they overcome their flaw and they get to their goal. So let me give you a couple of examples. So in Safe Haven, here's an example of a reveal or a twist that could happen along the way. So throughout the story, we get these little flashbacks, right, to like the abusive husband and, you know, what was happening and what happened that night that everything changed. And at first she's looking pretty guilty and like maybe she killed the guy, and, you know, she's starting to look a little bit, you know, like a criminal, like she's running away from justice or something. But then we actually find out that this detective that is after her is actually the abusive ex-husband, and he's abusing his power as a cop. And so like we're like, you know, surprised that, you know, he's actually the bad guy. This detective, you know, we're supposed to trust this guy because he's a cop, and, you know, kind of assume that she did something wrong. Well, it turns out he's actually the bad guy. And so that's kind of a reveal or a twist. And there's another one in that movie that I won't go into now, but there's another good one at the very end too. And then an example of a failure in Safe Haven. Okay, so like I said, she has to fail along the way. So there's this guy that she falls in love with in this tiny coastside town that she moves to, and tries to, you know, start anew with a new identity and a new life and a new job. And you know, she had a few chances to tell him the truth about her past, but she never does. She doesn't want to. She thinks she can just run away from it. But then the guy, who is friends with like the sheriff in the town, sees a flyer for her portraying her as a suspect in this murder case. And so he's like devastated, and he wants to find out the truth, and he confronts her, and he assumes the worst about her, and she flees again. You know, like she fails. She could have like maybe tried to stick around and like finally face this new problem, but her default is like running away. You know, she's not even gonna try. She's just gonna run away and try to start over again. Like her past is caught up to her. And once again, it's like blown up in her face because he doesn't believe her anymore, and he just tells her to go. So she goes, you know. And so that's an example of how she fails, okay, before she succeeds in confronting her past. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, and then like with it being romance, a lot of the time the love interest will have like their own fatal flaw. A lot of times like they each have their fatal flaws that they're overcoming. And so that's true in this movie. In this movie, you know, she falls in love with a single dad with 2 kids. His wife died, and like he is still not over it. And everybody can tell that he's not over her tragic early death. And like he doesn't want to trust anybody new or get involved with anybody new, and like in his mind it's way too much of a risk to start a new relationship with something with, you know, his kids and everything else that he has going on. But you know, they fall in love and he trusts her, but then he finds out that she was lying by not telling him the truth. And so now like he fails by telling her to just leave, like go, like I don't want to see you, you lied, blah blah blah. Okay, but then he starts to overcome his flaw when he runs after her, chases her, and tells her like, no, stop, like I'm sorry, like finds out the truth about what happened to her, and it's not really her fault, and like, you know, tells her that he loves her and to stay, and that she'll be fine, like they'll figure things out together. And so that's kind of how he overcomes his flaw. So if you're writing a romance, you know, a big piece to have is like, you know, both of the characters are figuring something out, and this will just add so much more depth to your story. But again, like this is not enough for her. Like he's overcoming his flaw now because he's learning to trust her. And learning to love again, even though, you know, the tragedy that happened with losing his wife. But, you know, she is not done like getting over her fatal flaw. So the movie goes on, and the ex-husband does finally catch up to her, and now like everyone's in danger because she didn't confront him in her past, and she was too scared to. But now, like, in order to keep, you know, these new like kids in her life that she absolutely adores safe, like she has to confront them and like pretty much put her life on the line to confront this abusive ex-husband and like overcome all of that, because he is the obstacle, he is the external obstacle. And then, you know, she has to overcome her flaw to, you know, get past him and get rid of him. And so, like I said, they're both intertwined. So by the end of the movie, you know, they actually get into like a physical altercation because he's basically trying to kill her and kill everybody because he's gone nuts and he's an alcoholic. But she basically like gives everything in order to save the kids, and you know, then the love interest shows up, and you know, it ends up in a happy way, of course. And he goes off to to jail, or I think he actually gets shot in the head in the end. Sorry if I'm spoiling it, but you know, it really is a good movie if you haven't seen it. So in the end, she overcomes both things. She overcomes, you know, the abusive ex-husband, and you know, her fear of facing the past and facing him, and she gets this new start in the new life with this wonderful new guy. So like I said, it really helps if they're both intertwined, and when you have both a character arc and a plot arc, that's when your characters will finish that story and just like sigh in satisfaction because it was so awesome. Like everything just ties up, and like even if they don't realize it, it's because there were like these two layers to your story structure. And so yeah, this is kind of like what you need to keep in mind as you're outlining your story for NaNoWriMo. It's a good idea to start with some of these basic points. Think about your character flaw and how that ties into your outline, and how they will overcome it in the end in order to reach that external goal. How will they overcome this internal flaw? Okay, and what I like to do is start off with those points and just flesh out more and more and more until these detailed beats, because the more detail that I have, that's how I don't get stuck. For you, you may just need a few basic points to get you from point A all the way to point Z, but for me, the more detail the better, otherwise I get stuck along the way. And I don't want to come to a screeching halt in the middle of November because I didn't, you know, dive deep enough into my outline. So yeah, the examples I gave for you today were romance, but you'll kind of see the same basic structure in other genres as well. And if you watch, you know, a good movie or read a good book, you'll see it. And if you take notes, that'll help you learn. Now is a good time to immerse yourself into some of the story structure. So watch a movie or two before NaNoWriMo just to help you ingrain some of the story structure and really learn it and understand it. And, you know, make sure you have the same thing in your own book. So yeah. That's all I have for you today. These were some of my best tips on outlining your novel for NaNoWriMo. I hope you find it helpful. Thank you for watching as always. And Thomas shared another really good resource down there in the comments on the hero's journey. That's another really good way to do story structure. And I think the gist of it just goes down to like this person wants something, but there's something in their way in order to get it, you know. And if you go to the Take Your Pants Off book, like she really breaks it down in such a like simple but like aha way. So yeah, definitely recommend Libby Hawker's book Take Your Pants Off. So yeah, but that's all I have for you today, and I hope you go back to working on your book so that in November we start this 50,000 word journey together, and hopefully we finish it. And whether or not we do, you know, I'm sure we'll make tons of really great progress on our stories. So yeah, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, and if you're one of my YouTube peeps, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next video. And as always, keep creating your art. Bye.